go in and start making changes to things. You might be fixing things that don't need to be fixed. You might be changing things that are really going well or that customers and employees appreciate. So you have to take the time to understand what's happening today and keep the things that are going well and fix the things that aren't. It sounds complex, but it's really not. It's just take a look at the current state and figure out what's going well and what's not, and then fix from there or keep doing the things that are working well from there.
Welcome to Becoming Radical, the podcast for creators, builders, and dreamers just like you. What does it mean to become radical in a world of constant change? Hosted by Michael Gaizutis, each week we'll explore the real-time journeys of those rewriting the rules. From untold failures to groundbreaking success. If you're ready to break the boundaries of limited thinking, this is your guide to unlimited growth.
Welcome to Becoming Radical. We are joined here today again with Annette Franz, who's the founder and CEO of CX Journey. Annette, it is so great to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. I know we had a couple minutes delay here, but I'm glad we're here and we're talking.
Better late than never. Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
That's right. Exactly. We were talking about California, all things California, and what we love, and how we originally, I think, both came from the Midwest, which is exciting. You know, it's interesting when you transplant yourself from another place, especially to California in the beginning. So, Well, it sounds like you. It is. You're right. Especially
growing up on a farm to, here we are in the beach life, right? So
that's right. In the beginning, it's like shock to the system, right? It's like fish in a fish tank, boom, but
exactly.
I totally get it. For me, it was San Diego. So it was kind of like the next thing to LA at first, and then eventually to the Bay. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
Well, we're really excited to have you here. You've been in this CX world, from what we understand, for over 30 years, it's an accomplishment. There's a lot that happens there.
Yes. And like I tell people, I started when I was 4. So just say
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. What first drew you to this field before it was even labeled, quote unquote, CX?
Yeah. I grew up on a farm in Ohio. I wanted to be a veterinarian. That requires it requires 6 quarters of chemistry. It's just like that. So even though I was salutatorian of my high school class, I hated chemistry, right? So, and you also have to be able to stand the sight of blood.
Totally get it. Yep.
I used to show animals, including horses. And when you show horses, they have to go through this whole series of equine tests before you can actually take them out. And I remember standing there as the vet was drawing blood from my horse's neck and watching their syringe.
Oh, gosh. You're like, no, I don't know about this.
I don't know about this. Yeah.
I understand.
I had moved to LA and after my 3rd year at Ohio State, and wanted to do something here. And I saw an ad for a job at JD Power and Associates. And that is, market research was all about math, numbers, writing. And these are all things that I loved and I still love. Cool. And so I was like, this is perfect. So
awesome.
So, and at JD Power and Associates, that was the early 90s. They were already doing, they were doing syndicated research. That's what they're well known for. But I was doing work on the custom research side and really enjoyed just digging in and figuring out, getting to the root cause and figure out what problems businesses were having so that we could fix those problems and help them do, great things going forward. So, and a lot of those problems revolved around the customer experience, but a lot of them also revolved around the employee experience. And I keep repeating this story where back then I used to say, hey, we got to listen to employees and look at employees and what they're doing. And every company that I talked to said, we'll listen to employees later. Let's focus on the customer now. And comes back to bite you in the butt later, right?
That's right. It does. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of customer experience in today's business environment? What do you see happening there typically?
that it's driven by the employee experience, because I would say that because I've been in plenty of leadership meetings where we're having this conversation, and I'll have somebody lean over to me or meet up with me afterwards and go, "I'm so glad you said that. I never thought about that connection between the employee experience and customer experience." And, when you start digging in and we do the work that we do to improve the customer experience, a lot of that stuff is just very much lipstick on a pig, right? Very, surface level, what the customer sees. But it goes much deeper than that. And just like any other problem that a business is having, you got to get to the root cause and you got to fix the root cause. And a lot of that is around employees and the tools and the resources and the policies and the processes that are allowing them or not allowing them to do their jobs and serve their customers. So yeah, absolutely.
It makes total sense. Yeah, it makes total sense. You often say you can't transform something you don't understand.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that a bit for us, for our audience?
Yes. If you just go in and start making changes to things, you might be fixing things that don't need to be fixed. You might be changing things that are really going well or that customers and employees appreciate. So you have to take the time to understand what's happening today and keep the things that are going well and fix the things that aren't. So it sounds complex, but it's really not. It's just take a look at the current state and figure out what's going well and what's not, and then fix from there, or keep doing the things that are working well from there. So
keep it simple. Understand what you're talking about. Understand what it is you're referring to. Context plays a role. Yeah, I totally get it. It makes sense.
Absolutely.
It's easy to understand and hard to implement. That's how it goes, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. In your book, Built to Win, you focus on building a customer-centric culture.
Yes.
What are the early signs you think of a company heading in the wrong direction culturally?
Oh boy, there are probably a lot of them. but usually when they come to me, the things that they'll start to say is employee turnover is out of control. Customer retention is mind-boggling. It's nowhere near 90 whatever percent, right? Those are usually the big ones. People don't want to work for, there's that cliche, people leave businesses or people leave managers, but people leave culture. And that's not just employees, it's customers too, because customers feel what's happening inside your business too. So,
right. Absolutely. They do. They do. And, I think culture plays such a huge role. If people aren't engaged and they're retracted, if they feel they're, they're not integrated and unified into what you're building, if they feel there's a, fragmentation, and it could be small to large, you're absolutely right. It's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get the, I was just gonna say, you get the culture that leaders design are the ones that they allow. And a lot of times what they allow is really, really, really painful. And I've worked for some of those companies, and it's, it's the things you reward that you go, or the people that you fire that you go, why did they do that?
I totally get it. Back in the day, I was hired as a project manager. We all had bills to pay. And I was a horrible project manager, and I knew it, right? And I'm like, why are you hiring me for this role? I need to be helping people with sales and growth and relationships. And somehow they thought it could work. And I was like, I don't know about that. So at the end of the day, it's really hard to even get to cultural alignment and the full aspects of it if there's a misalignment in what you're doing from day one. So that's really interesting. To think about in that context. How do you feel leaders, can practically shift from a product obsessed to a customer obsessed culture without losing sight, as we talked about, of growth metrics? How can they make that paradigm shift, from that end?
And it's a great question, because that happens a lot. And I'll give you the prime example, and I think that'll probably answer the question. Oftentimes I get companies reach out to me, startups that say, hey, can you take a look at our product and tell us what you think of it, right? And I'm sure you've gotten that too. I'm sure many others have. My first question is always, what problem does this solve for your customers? And they go, oh, I never even thought about that.
I don't know about that one. Yeah.
And it's a huge mindset shift, right? And I think Seth Godin was the one who had this quote, which was find products for your customers, not customers for your products, right? And that's the shift that companies have to make is we're doing this because we need to solve problems for customers. And I think that's a tough mindset shift for a lot of people, but it's what has to happen in order to go from one to the other.
That makes total sense. Seth Godin's great. Yeah, I remember the Purple Cow, reading that years ago. It's years back, but
exactly.
but really meaningful. And you're absolutely right. You have to develop the right product, the right services for customers. They should exist for customers, right? That's part of the beginning of customer experience is designing and building and architecting for them, right? Like, why are we here? We're here for you, right? And this is how we're going to make it better. And then we're going to have a store of value. And then that value is going to equal profits and revenue and growth. Makes total sense. Simple to understand, hard to hard to implement. Exactly.
I know. Amen to everything you just said, because that is my work in a nutshell, right? So absolutely.
That's really cool. Can you share a story? We're all about storytelling, right? But it may be something that's really easy from the past that you just remember, quick recall. It might be something that's more in depth, but a story where leadership buy-in made or broke a CX transformation effort. So you're in this scenario where, leadership bought in and it either went really well or it just broke everything with that CX transformation effort.
Yeah. I mean, it's so critical because if you don't have that, and it's not just buy-in, it's commitment. If you don't have that commitment from your leadership, which is committing to the resources, whether it's financial, capital, human, time, whatever it is, right? And committing to see it through to success. I have probably seen more examples of how we've lost that commitment, but I've also, and it goes sideways. It really does because now they're done with it, right? I mean, here's a prime example, a client that I worked with years ago who basically said, my contact was the CRO. So he was overseeing sales, and this happens a lot where sales and experience, or sales and marketing and the experience are same under the same executive. But the problem is that Andy had the commitment from the CEO, at least at the outset, to do this work and to do the transformation. And what ended up happening was, at the end of every quarter, we had to reevaluate, look at the numbers. What are we doing with revenue? And push comes to shove, it was, I'm the CRO, I got to get out and sell, versus, I'm the CCO, so I got to go over here and focus on customers. And this was every quarter. And at the end of every fiscal year, and I worked with them for 2.5 years. Oh, wow. The problem is, and I kept telling them this, is that they're one and the same. Right. Yeah. Your sales are down because you're doing something over here that isn't what customers need, want, expect, not solving problems for them. Right.
Exactly.
So if you shift that thinking around and go, hey, you know what, let's focus on what the customer experience is and what their needs are and preferences and jobs to be done.
Yes.
Over here, I won't have to be thinking about that every quarter. Right. I'll be
right.
Again, another mindset shift, right? But that has happened a couple of times and then, by the way, you lose the CEO's commitment at that point because all he's suddenly thinking about is, again, going back to those quarterly numbers and then the fiscal year, blah, blah. So initially I had the commitment. When I first started going out and working with clients, I do this whole set of interviews. I interview the entire leadership team. I interview a sampling of employees. I interview a sampling of customers because, again, you can't transform something you don't understand. So I want to go in and understand what's happening.
That's right.
In that particular example, after I finished all of the interviews, I came back to the CCO/CRO and I said, okay, my report is 60 some pages.
Yeah. Wow.
Do you want me to do the executive summary version for the CEO? Yeah. And he's like, no. I want you to take into all of that. So, and at the beginning, the CEO said, we only have a communication issue. And then I come in and I'm like, here's my 60 pages. Not quite just communication issues, right? And so he was all in. He was all in until we had to get to the, end of the quarter, every quarter. But but we lost him. Over time, we lost him. And then, the work just... The work just went.
Well, I think there's something to be said about greatness and transformation taking time. Everybody wants quick wins, speed to market,
Yes.
right? Minimum viable product, MVP everywhere. We hear this all the time, right? And this kind of aligns fundamentally with customer experience, product experience, user experience, any of those things.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, everything takes time. And you're right, there has to be total alignment. It's really interesting when something is misaligned when it comes to customer experience or user experience, even if it's not intentionally misaligned, if there's customer confusion or user confusion, it could be something as simple as you're a company and you look too big.
Yes.
Right. And I heard this the other day. It's really interesting. You look too big. We were going to contact you, but we waited because you look too big and we didn't think our budget was of the right caliber to support. And that's not good. So obviously you have a misalignment, right? Because if that's who you want to talk to, that's a good example that, that's a miss. So how do we really understand what our customers and users want? How do we make sure we craft the right experiences? We validate that, we co-validate, and then we continue to evolve. And then I think most importantly, we radically differentiate, playing off what you said, right? That's where that experience layer comes into play. How do we give our customers something they want and crave and desire and above and beyond?
Yeah. And I just want to unpack something that you just said, because you said a lot of really good things right there, right? Number one, quick wins. That's huge. Even before that, you said this takes time. Like this isn't a one-off. It's not just hey, we're going to do this for a quarter and then, we're done kind of thing. It's truly a business transformation. You're doing things differently. You're doing them more efficiently, more effectively because you're doing them for the customer and because the customer, solves problem for a customer. So quick wins are huge because you want to keep showing that stuff is happening, right? That we're making an impact, right? So that's really huge. And it's going to be this continuous thing. It's just going to become the new way that you do business. And that's why I say too in Built to Win that, this deliberately designing this customer-centric culture, eventually we just live it and breathe it, and we don't have to make it a point every day to go, why am I doing this? We're doing it, and we have built into our processes and how we've socialized and operationalized it that this is just how we do business today. Building culture is also not a one-off kind of thing. It's ongoing. It has to be sustained and maintained and all that. But it's the same kind of thing. You want to get it to the point where, have you ever heard that story? What the hell is water?
No, I haven't heard that one.
That's a great story, and I've used it several times. I think it's a great analogy for this, right? So it's these two fish are swimming in the ocean, and another fish comes swim by the other direction. It's a story that I forget the gentleman's name. He used it for part of his graduation speech, right? But he, two fish swimming in the water. Older fish comes swim by, and he goes, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And they go, "What the hell is water?" Right? Yeah. It's like it's just where we live and what we breathe and who we are and what we do and all of that. So I've used that over and over again in examples and stories about how that's what you want your culture to become. That's what you want the experiences to become is what the hell is water? What the hell? What? Yeah. I don't know, because it's just how we do things and why we do things. So,
it's ingrained. Yeah, it's ingrained and fully integrated. It makes total sense. Really cool. What role do you think customer personas and journey mapping really play in CX transformation? Are companies doing them wrong today, you think, or could they be doing them better?
I think they play a huge part. I know that like customer expectations right now are that the experience is personalized. A lot of businesses and hyper personalized, to that matter. A lot of businesses aren't there yet. So the personas can take them to at least a level where we've grouped employees and or customers, whichever one whose experience you're designing, into these groups that have like needs, pain points, problems to solve, so we can define an experience around that, and help people in that regard. And I think a lot of people are doing it wrong. I think a lot of people are still looking at buyer personas or UX, user personas, whereas the customer personas are very different. And same with employees too. So, but it's a great way to start when you're doing your journey mapping, for example, because it takes you to that level where you can start to think about a group of folks who have common. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I did some journey mapping workshops for a furniture rental company. And they had three very distinct personas. They had corporate relo.
Yep.
They had kids going to school, and they had military relocation, right? So if you're moving from Camp Pendleton over to the other end of the country, you're going to need, your spouse is going to need, you're going to need relo, and your spouse is going to need to be set up and blah, blah.
Yep.
So and each one is very, very different, right?
Yeah.
The student going off to college, for example, mom and dad are going to be involved, and they're going to, a corporate relo.
Yeah.
Your business is probably going to be involved, right? The purchasing department or whoever. So very different needs and very different steps in those journeys as well. So I think that's a really important example of why.
It's a great example.
Yeah.
That's a great example. It makes total sense. And, speaking of that, as we think about everything changing with AI and automation on the rise, I mean, we all see it happening. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of things actually happening at some level. It's on the rise. How do you see the balance between tech and human connection evolving specifically in CX and customer experience?
I had a conversation with somebody about this morning, and I said, the tech, the AI, whatever it is, has to focus on the transactional. Whereas over here, we need to keep the relationship piece of it very much human.
Yes.
And there's research out there. PwC did this a few years back, where they found that the more technologically advanced brands become, the more people want that human interaction. Right?
Absolutely, 100%. Oh, I totally agree. And, I think what's fascinating is that automation can be very efficient. It can really help you to fundamentally scale, to transform industries, cross vertical. You could be in agriculture, you could be in B2B, tech, you could be in e-commerce or retail, food and beverage, doesn't matter, right? You could be in any industry. It's very, very helpful. But I agree. And in fact, for ourselves, in running our agency on the other side of what I do, we actually changed our entire system of, the initial point of impact if somebody calls us as an agency to be human-led, because everything was very automated. And now we're finding that, what do people want? They want to talk to somebody. They want to have a relationship, a real person. Yes. That's the most stressful thing in any industry, as we all know. When you call XYZ internet company or XYZ power company, and you're just pressing 000 all the time.
Exactly.
Right? Typical consumer use case. Yeah. But it happens in businesses too. And you're right. I think the human component in CX is so important and undervalued at this point, and should be well valued. Yes.
Absolutely. And I think what we can do is automate those meaningless, repetitive, redundant tasks, and then free up people to spend more time on the building stronger relationships and answering the questions that are more complex and those kinds of things. So
exactly, 100%. Yeah, I agree. What do you think is one underrated CX metric that leaders should be tracking more closely in today's day and age?
I would say it's customer effort score. There's this huge focus on NPS and NPS and NPS. Yeah. But I think customer effort score is truly about a metric about the customer. How much did we make it hard for you to interact with us? Did we make it easy for you to interact with us? Yeah. And then figure out why and fix it, right? So I think there's a lot to that metric. And I think we should do an employee effort score too. Help them because that certainly will translate to customer effort as well.
Employees care if you care, and I think the same applies to partners, to vendors, to 100%. Those you're working with, contractors. It doesn't matter, right? They care if you care. Just care. You care more. That's it. It's really important.
You know what? Yeah. It's so funny, and you can't make people care. This is so.
Oh, you're right.
I had years ago. Yes, I had years ago. Discovered Bob Chapman, who's the CEO of Barry Waymiller, who wrote the book Everybody Matters, and he had this epiphany years ago, and I discovered him through his TED Talk back in 2011, 2012. He had this epiphany that employees are in my care for 8, 10, 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
Why? At the end of the day, do I send them home in worse shape? When they get here, why do I send them home and they're upset and they're angry and they take their spouse and their kids? Yeah. So he and I connected. We talked several times, and there was a case where I was working with a client, and I just had to call him one day because I was like, you know what? How do I make this person care? He doesn't care about people. Just like you were saying, you have to, if employees know you care.
Yes.
So we had this great conversation. And in the end, he basically said, you know what? You can't make leaders. Yeah. They have to care. It has to come from the heart. And I truly believe that, you can't force somebody to do that. So not everybody is meant to be a leader. So
it's absolutely true. And, I think as you are becoming a better human, right? You care more, right? As you go through more experiences, the ups and the downs and the all arounds and everything that happens, I think you start to care more. I think, that translates into better leadership, but also better human relationships, which there is a lot of crossover there. It's really important. You're absolutely right. The forcing someone, the driving someone to care, it's a tough ask. That's for sure.
Yes, it is.
For somebody listening today or viewing today across everywhere we are, a founder, a startup, a VC-backed startup, a small business, what do you think are 3 simple steps that they could take today, right now, as we're speaking, as they hear this, when it goes out, to improve or begin improving their customer experience?
Yeah. The first thing is, and they're not small things, at least not the first one. The first, I guess I'll make the first one a baby step, and that is to assess your culture, to really, truly assess it. And you might not be the right person to assess it, right? You might need to bring somebody in who does it, or you may have somebody who can do that, but assess it and make sure that it is where you want it to be, because it really is the foundation of everything you do. So, so I think I would say that's the first thing, is really just focus on that. Number 2 is I would assess your leadership team too, right? And go, okay, are they aligned? Are they all on board with me, Mr. CEO, Mrs. CEO, founder, whatever, right? Are they all on the same page? And a lot of times you think they are, but you would be surprised how often they're not, and how often they will say what you want to hear. But, I always say there's that meeting after the meeting.
Oh, yeah.
They're out there and they're having this meeting after the meeting, or they're, saying the things that you don't want them to say after you are just finished meeting with everybody. Yeah. But I would say that's an important thing. And then the next thing is I would start figuring out how to listen to your employees. And it doesn't have to even cost a lot of money. You can do things that don't cost money. You can do managers, leaders having one-on-ones with the employees. Don't do exit interviews. Do stay interviews. Why are people staying? What can we keep? What can we do to continue to keep them here? You can have an employee advisory board. You can do employee listening tours. Those kinds of things that don't have to cost a lot of money, but you're getting input from your employees about the culture, the leadership, their experience, everything. So those are 3 things that I would start with.
Makes a lot of sense, and that comes back to another point in question. If you could mandate just one CX habit for every CEO in America, what would it be? What would that one thing be? Oh,
gosh, it would be to listen to your employees, because they're the ones who will share the nuggets that will help you fix the customer experience. I mentioned earlier that I interview leaders, employees, and customers when I first start working with a client. It was a few years back, one of my earlier clients in my own business, where I was doing these interviews, and one of the employees, and I remember his name. I remember exactly who it was and exactly what he said. And he basically said, we don't have the tools, the resources, the training, policies are outdated, processes are broken to serve our customers the way that they deserve to be served. I mean, those words exactly, which are powerful. And you have employees who know this, who feel this. So listen to your employees. They've got nuggets that will, you've got to do that. And I think too many times leaders discount employees and go,
They do. You're absolutely right. Yeah. And it's unfortunate, because if you think about it, it's a collective. The collective is what's shaping the trajectory of the business, of the brand, of the product, of the service, of any of those things, right? Without all of those individuals. And again, employees, yes. And then also those attached to, but maybe possibly not as connected as an employee, contractors, partners, strategic vendors, anybody, right? Shareholders, investors are all interconnected, interwoven. So it's very, very true. Yeah, absolutely. It's great habit to think about. What's a hard lesson you've learned, as a leader for so long, building CX journey? What's one of those hard lessons you think you've come across?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think, and I'm thinking about an experience that I had with leadership back in the day when I wasn't in my business, right? And it really has to do with, and I don't even know if it's a hard lesson. It's just a lesson, which was, the things that you see as you're an employee, as you're working with someone or working for someone. I honestly, I made a mental note of all the things that I said I would never do as a result of the things that I experienced as an employee that I would never do when I was a leader, number one, and when I had my own business. I mean, those were non-negotiables, and I've carried those on, and those were from my early days. So, and they were painful times. They were painful times. Yeah. I would say be the leader you want to have, I guess is a good way of putting it. So,
but I totally agree. I remember for myself, just a quick story, and I haven't really shared this publicly, but it reminds me of that, the hard lesson, working for an agency years ago. This was the same role where I was a project manager, and we were going to pitch a very large brand, massive brand that was in Silicon Valley. And, this was a pitch presentation. And they're like, look, you're just here for hands. Don't say anything. Say nothing. You don't speak. You don't talk. Yeah. If they ask you something, you say nothing. So, of course, what did I do? I spoke. I didn't even mean it.
Of course.
I spoke because that's what I do. I speak, right? Speak too much. And actually, they were receptive. The people on the other end were very receptive to what I said. And then they're like, wow, good job speaking afterwards. But what's really interesting is that to tell someone not to speak, it goes back to this human element, this caring element. Like, these are people. These are people empowering your business, making you profitable. Remember that. Align with them. Connect with them, and then that engagement will skyrocket that chance for customer experience. So you're absolutely right. Yeah. Looking ahead, we're looking out now. What excites you most about the future of where customer experience is going?
Oh gosh, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but
maybe not so much.
Remember, I've been doing this for 30 some years, and I don't feel like the conversations I'm having are all that much different from what I talked about 40 years ago, right? So that's number one, my number one point. But I am excited to see how, and I know technology. Tools to facilitate, support the experience. But I think that it'll be interesting to see how that helps us be more efficient in terms of and make life easier for our employees and for our customers ultimately.
Yes.
So I think that's an important piece. I think we're still learning about a lot of things. I was joking with somebody the other day because about 10 years ago, somebody asked me about trends, and we were talking about omni-channel back then.
Yeah, that was a big thing then. Omni-channel,
We're still talking about omni-channel stuff. So that's one of my favorite ones. But that's what I would say. I would say, I'm interested to see how technology is going to and how data is going to be used. I mean, data is a part of everything that we're doing, and in terms of designing the experiences. So how the data is going to be used and used differently to do things differently. So.
Data is so crucial to driving the right decisions, to empowering the right experiences. I couldn't agree more. It's paramount. One of the last questions I have for you is, what does a CX journey mean to you personally?
It means day-to-day, end-to-end, everything that I do as a customer from the moment that I have a need and a problem to solve, and I'm looking for a brand or a product or whatever to, and what the steps are that I will take from that moment until my problem is solved. So I think that's probably the best way to describe it, and beyond, because it doesn't just end with the purchase. It goes long after that. So,
yes, it's all about being resonant. And, I think equally making sure people continue to have that really solid connection, that solid experience back to the brand, the product, the service, the team, et cetera.
Absolutely.
So that's phenomenal. Absolutely. Well, it has been a treat to have you here. A joy. We appreciate your knowledge, your wisdom, your grace for the space, the opportunities to understand more about CX and what you're doing at CX Journey. Your authorship. Thank you so much. You're definitely becoming radical. We will be cheering you on every step of the way. Where can people find you and learn about you and engage with you if they'd like to work with you?
Oh, that's awesome. I love to make new connections on LinkedIn, so you can absolutely find me there. And then my website, cx-journey.com. There's information about my work, my books, and you can find contact information there as well. So
amazing. Well, we will put all of this in the show notes for our listeners, for our viewers. Again, thank you for being here today, Annette. We appreciate and value your time. I know you're busy, but we will take this back to them, to our community. We'll open it up, and we would love to have you back on the show sometime in the future.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Becoming Radical. If today's episode sparked something in you, follow wherever you listen, join the conversation, and share it with someone ready to think beyond limits. Be unlimited, be bold, and become radical. See you next time.
Game over.